This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, the first for December. Hopefully the year will end on an up note. Anyways, today we're going to be covering a little bit more of some of the day-to-day stuff for vendors, how models differ from one to the other, basically, what company A does compared to company B, how things work inside each of those separate entities. I'll start us off with the company I used to work for, where the Magic department, and this is what we're talking about in specific, is how it interacts with Magic rather than any other products they sell. Where I worked, the Magic department was very generalized. It was basically, we had our employees, and they fulfilled every single role in the department. Mm-hmm. Some companies are a lot more specialized. You have one person that does intake, whatever. And generally, we had 2 to 3 people that would process intake, but they didn't just process intake. They'd also pull, they'd also integrate inventory, they'd also pack and ship. Okay. And it was just a all-inclusive Magic specialist was the title. And if it had to do with Magic cards, you could be asked to do it at any time, didn't matter. Okay. That was kind of how things ran there. How were they for you?
So I worked for Troll. That was my first job for a large vendor. And Troll is very specialized because they cover so many verticals. So when you go to trollandtoad.com and you see along the top all the games or types of games they serve, each one for them is a product category. Similarly, when you look at their buy list, and if you were to download some of their Excel spreadsheets, you'll notice that there are actual category codes on there, and they correspond to things. M for Magic, P for Pokemon, 4 is something you wouldn't expect. It might be Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic itself ran similar to the other card games because they were all very fluid like that, as opposed to board games, minis, etc. For Magic, though, everything starts with the intake position. So named similarly, function slightly similar. Intake for Troll was more about dealing with incoming buy lists off the website. There was a lot of work that went into it at the time. They didn't have what they call now a reverse cart system where you can just submit it directly. People actually had to take in that email, compare it to the buy list that was on the site, and then give you a yes or no. And there are going to be a lot of people that remember that because we're talking almost a decade now when I first started this. Yeah. And if you go back on Reddit, you're just going to see Troll get railed for this because people were saying yes to buy lists, but there was no connection between intake person 1 versus intake person 2, and if 1 yes to buy list, 2 yes to buy list, but 1 entered their buy list before 2, and 2 contained the same item that zeroed out the need at Troll, buy list 2 that got the yes would get bounced back to the person, and that just created a huge amount of friction because there was no reverse card. It wasn't done in real time. It was basically a competition, first in, first out. And they also did a bit of pack cracking when it came to set releases. Troll gets infinite product from Southern, so at that point in time, you could only start cracking at 12:01 a.m. either, I think, the Thursday before release, so you could get all your singles processed and placed, and then you could start shipping at 12:01 a.m. on Friday. So that was kind of an all hands on deck. So for anybody who worked in Magic that wasn't dedicated to pack cracking, you could come in and do it if you wanted. I believe intake was dedicated towards some of that. So it was a very specialized role with exactly what it sounds like, incoming product. But it did not deal with all of the ways that Troll would intake product. There is another intake role there was called acquisitions. And again, that role does what it sounds like. They were actually in charge of going out and acquiring product that was listed elsewhere. So that wasn't necessarily with competitors. That was more Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace now, Magic Online Traders League for anybody that used that website. They were basically looking at open marketplaces to see who was selling at a price they liked. It didn't have to be buy list. It could be above buy list, but as long as there was a profit to make, or they knew that they weren't getting enough of something in, they could go make that outreach, and acquisitions would, go out and bring in whatever they needed from whatever non-competitor source that was required.
Now, was that the type of thing that when you were doing that, you were paid based on the commission of the size of the intake, or did you just get a flat rate and were expected to maintain a quota? Because we had, like, our intake, it was just reverse card.
Mm-hmm.
It was easy. We had 2 to 3 people that would process the orders when they came in, verify condition, that was it. We didn't have anyone that was like, outside sources. So was it just commission or
so the job positions that I'm going to go through are actually given to me that somebody worked through all of them, and I'm going to have them on a Patreon only cast later this week to actually discuss these roles in depth, because there's a lot more to them than what I'm going to cover here. But sure. I believe no role at Troll and Toad was commission based or based on sale or acquisition while you were working on premises. It changed if you were going to a show at that point in time, or you were buying on behalf of Troll and Toad for something kind of show related, or they sent you out somewhere specifically.
Like buying a store out or something.
Yeah, essentially.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't mean to digress.
No, it's fine. It's a good question, because not every company has this intake and acquisition role, 2 separate roles, very and specialized to what they do. And it was more about just kind of patching up product. I think you had your slate of where you needed to go and what you needed to hit, so it wasn't like competitive in that sense. So you wouldn't need to necessarily offer a commission in that regard, because you were just looking, to fill those holes.
Yeah.
And like going through the product life cycle. So after intake and acquisitions, what would you guys do next at Mini? So the product has been brought in, it's rung up, it's on the website. I put in an order for something, that comes in.
So we did pick lists, which I'm sure Troll does as well.
Yep.
It's basically, it is a list of every card by alphabetized first, because the way our inventory was sorted was it was chronological, full alphabetical within the set.
Okay.
And when the pick list came in, it was chronological, full alphabetical by the set. So you would take that pick list once, obviously divide it up, because you're not going to have one person pull 1,000 orders in a day. You take all of those pick lists, you put them down at the filling station, not a gas station. That's where orders are filled.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all alphabetical. It's indicated by condition based on if it's a penny sleeve or not. And you go through and it says, all right, the first card is Alpha Plains, near mint, pull it. You scan your barcode at each stage.
Yep.
And that lets the system know that, 1, I'm the one filling this order, so if something messes up, I'm the one. And 2, that card has now been processed. In addition to that, you scan a condition bar so that it matches.
Oh, okay.
And the system will not let you continue if it doesn't match or you don't scan an out of stock.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only 2 options. Match condition, out of stock. If it's something where they're ordering like, a near mint foil and we have one that's borderline LP, we'll hold the order, we'll contact the person and say, hey, this is what we've got. Do you want that? Or would you rather just have us do it out of stock, return the difference, whatever.
Yeah.
And that was one of the biggest things we did. Now, that was separate from the retail orders because our warehouse was near the retail site.
Okay.
So we would also have retail orders come in separate, and they had to be out the door by 9 a.m. because they had to be at the store when the store opened, which was obviously a nightmare for set release days.
Yes.
Because for 2.5 days prior, you are scrambling to get.
That's it. You're locked in on that.
Yeah. Packs opened, stuff sorted, integrated, alphabetized, in the systems, quantities right, orders filled, done.
Mm-hmm.
So those come in a separate pick list. You do those immediately, and that's actually usually you have everyone pick a whole order. That's not done as a pick list. You pick the whole order, you take it over, and it goes on top of the invoice sheet so that everything stays together so you can verify if something's missing. It wasn't on the invoice, but it is showing up in the system. Let's see what happened. And from there, it goes to the packing station. So same deal. Someone scans the barcode for the order. They scan their name barcode. They say it's done. They pack it up.
Yep.
At that point, We would put it in one of those post office bins. And when that bin got full, we took it over to the line and it shipped out.
Yep.
So the entire process was contained within our department. No one from the warehouse would ever touch cards. They wouldn't touch anything but a sealed box that had stuff in it.
Okay.
And that was mostly out of a concern of like, all right, well, we don't want to put too much on the warehouse for them to have to know stuff.
Yep.
On top of the warehouse, which is already a nightmare based on,
They
what
all are.
organization use. Yeah, they're all bad. There's
Yep.
no such thing as a clean warehouse. Even GTS, despite their immaculate-looking warehouses, still lose this stuff constantly. And wanting to have people that knew magic over there, so that if there was something subtle that came up where you had, wait, is this real?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure. Is the condition on? I'm not quite sure. That way you had people that knew that were touching the card at first.
Yep.
And they could immediately step in and say, hey, this is wrong, this is right, and try to get any issues solved before they arose.
Yep.
My understanding is that's not how all companies do it. I believe some companies have specialists, which
Again,
you basically just touched on. And that was, the basic workflow was we're there from 8 to 5. By 9 o'clock, all the retail orders are out, and the people who are doing buybacks are finishing up buybacks if they have big ones, or we just immediately get to the pick list. And then, of course, as I'm sure at Troll, there's the project list, which never ends and constantly has new stuff added to it for this is a project we need to work on sometime in the next indefinite futurity.
Oh, yeah. That
verifying inventory levels or whatever.
Yeah, that was all obfuscated up a level actually towards where I was doing my work with business intelligence work. We might have skipped a part, maybe not. So between a buy order received and the cards being placed in the warehouse, they're read in obviously. What goes on or what went on there?
So there's two different processes to this. There's the online buy list, and then there's the show buy list. So the online buy list, it shows up in a package. We see the buy list number.
Yep.
We verify, here's the buy list. Great. We're going to verify the quantity. That is then put in a buyback box that goes into an office, and the buybacks are batch uploaded rather than one buyback at a time. So we did batch uploads typically Monday, Wednesday, Friday, depending. And it was just however many buybacks we had. Now that they're verified, upload, throw them in. And the exception to that is obviously your show buybacks.
Yes.
So some companies, when they go to shows, they itemize their buybacks throughout the weekend.
Yep.
We didn't. That is a lot of overhead that we just didn't want to deal with, especially because we were the warehouse employees as well. So we would fly back Sunday and be right back at work the next day.
Entering and everything else.
Yeah. So what would happen is that would go into the same office as all the other buybacks. Management would get it. They would catalog all of it. And they would check, all right, about how much money did we spend? Great. About how much do we have in buys? Cool. We're within normal, reasonable limits, where it's whatever percentage your company establishes. At that point, okay, I've made the spreadsheet. I have my CSV. I'm going to upload this batch. And that honestly could sometimes take 2 to 3 weeks.
Jeez, okay.
Depending on what else happens. Because GP Kansas City last year or the year before, Modern Horizons came out that weekend and there was a show.
Yeah.
So when you get back from that show, you're dealing with a Modern Horizons release. You're not uploading that batch at all.
Understood, yeah.
So you've got, potentially 5 to 6 figures in buy that's kind of just sitting there waiting to be processed. And once that batch gets in there, all right, everything's batched, same as online buy lists. I have uploaded this batch. Guys, here you go. Integrate this. So at that point, everything's kind of in a random order. We would then sort it by set, and then we would alpha within set. And of course, we have the 26 trays that anyone who's worked somewhere with cards is familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy them on Amazon.
Yeah, they're amazing. And, alpha them out, put them all back in the box, and then throw them into the inventory from there.
Got it.
And same deal, chronological, alphabetical, etc. And that's that was basically the flow of the day. We'd have morning, you send orders out. Afternoon, you're taking orders in and filling and sorting. And that's basically all you're doing the whole time.
Okay. A lot of that is fairly similar to what went on at Troll. There are two roles at Troll. There's the sorter and the verifier that deal with the buy list once they come in. The sorter is exactly what it sounds like, just sorting all that stuff out as it comes in because it's got to get back into inventory, but you are the last layer of defense, really. It gets to you, you sort it out so it can be pushed into the warehouse by that role, right? And the verifier is also what it sounds like, and this is like one of the only sentences I kept that you might hear repeated. This is the job where everyone just kind of hates you because you catch everyone else's mess ups.
Yep.
So basically, this is condition checking, sorting checks. Everything happens between a buy list entry and warehouse right there. You know, you are the last line to make sure that everything is going to go into the system as it should because it meets quality check. And it's weird that role and the people receiving the buy lists straddle kind of the sorter and should also have condition checks on both ends. So when it is received at the sorter, you know if anything's been messed up or needs to be retagged because the person opening and verifying the buy list should have known. And the idea of having verification right before it goes into the warehouse versus spot checking the warehouse, kind of weird. But it is what it is for that point in time where Troll was a household name and one of the largest vendors in the industry. You know, they were the ones vacuuming up everything at that point in time. Things might have changed, but this was kind of a necessary role. So once everything's gone through sorting and all issues handled, they're ready to go back into the warehouse. It then goes back into its section of the warehouse. So it goes to whoever deals with magic in the warehouse that will put it back, and there it rests until it comes in on a purchase order. From there, it's basically exactly what you said, except Troll purchase orders are varied across that product catalog, and an order is basically in its own bin, and you scan it onto that bin, and thus it can be tracked across the warehouse as it goes or is filled through all product categories, eventually hitting one last stopgap check where somebody picks up that entire PO, reads down the PO, verifies everything
Make
is
sure
there.
It's there.
Yeah,
Yep.
and then it hits packaging and shipping to be picked up by USPS or what have you. Otherwise, it's basically the exact same thing. You know, a
Now,
warehouse is
at
kind
the
of warehouse.
verification stage, once it's in the warehouse, were the magic product in that case? So say they got Mage Knight along with the magic singles.
Mm-hmm.
Would the magic singles be separate, or would they be enclosed in a box that they couldn't get in? Because ours were enclosed. So once it left our room, that was it. There was no check in place after that. It was just, here's magic order 1 that matches up with what's supposed to be here. Great, there it goes. Was that how it was, or were they able to look through it?
No, the bins were just, like you said, postal bins. For the most part, and orders were bundled together because everything was continuously added, and then that entire order that order wasn't placed in its final box until it got re-verified and shipped out, because there are some were some extenuating circumstances that would change the way something needs to be shipped out. For a very long time, because Troll dealt with minis, they had a difficulty determining how to ship minis and cards and not get the dreaded, hey, we didn't receive this card or this mini in this package, and it actually being there, but in the packaging itself, because these are loose minifigs, and you need to bundle them properly. And they went so far as to take the cards, top load them, seal them up, whatever, and just tape them to the inside of the box somewhere so they would be locatable. And they ran into huge problems with shipping and just people opening boxes and not realizing where their cards were kept. And you might think oh, well, how could you just miss what you ordered when you open the box? And it is kind
It
of...
happens a lot.
It is. And you don't really think about how awkward it is to sort through a package that can be so varied like that you might miss something in all the packaging that you're given, because some of these minis are still wicked expensive and frail.
Yeah.
You have to package them like you're handling a child, you know. You have to swaddle them the entire way through, you know, bubble wrap them if you have to, whatever you're going to put internally, and think about that, right? You have this mini, let's say it's a tall mini, it's a big HeroClix, right? So you're talking somewhere like 8 to 10 inches, so you know the size of the box it's going to come in. That's a really big box to have like 4 magic cards in as well. So now you have this figure that's bubble wrapped, that's inside, let's say we'll use that standard like brown paper packaging, you know, so it's just like that mushed kind of crinkled paper.
Yeah.
Where do you put the magic cards in that package so somebody's going to recognize that they're still there in the order, or not lose them when they're opening it up, you know? And that was a problem that it took a very long time to solve, and it didn't happen a lot, but it happened every now and again, and they knew immediately that these mixed orders like that were going to be a problem, but they would kind of rather eat that chance than deal with saying, okay, no, you can't put this order together. It's got to be 2 separate, and we're going to charge you for shipping twice or something like that. You know, they did the best to try and get that done.
That's something I've noticed is common with a lot of minis, because we had the same problem. So the minis department was run very similar, basically, separate area, whatever. But there were still minis that, like Rage of Demons, there was one of the beholders with like the tongue.
Yep.
That tongue broke off of 90% of them out of the package. And then half of the ones that made it out of the package would lose the tongue in transit no matter what you did. And like, we used packing peanuts, everything. So that's one of those things that I think, just as kind of an aside, universally, anyone that ships minis is going to struggle with that, and it sucks.
Yep.
But that's, again, why you kind of have like this specialist type of role where, all right, well, I'm going to figure out how to do this.
Yeah. And so
as best as possible.
You know, you mentioned those projects, right? That was one of them. Like, there was a part where I was just walking through the warehouse going to get water, and there was like a bunch of managers musing over this box that they had received back, and it was a ship back of a large mini and a Caracas, and we're in the mid 2000s here, so the Caracas is almost like $100 some.
Yeah.
And what happened was, because it was this big mini and one singular magic card, they packaged everything up as best they could to secure it. And so, okay, you have this really big, awkwardly sized box because this mini is so ridiculously sized that the Caracas is in there. What they did was they secured the Caracas inside the, like, whatever case it was in to keep it from getting damaged during shipping, and like taped it to somewhere inside the box. But they didn't just like tape it there and forget it. They actually like they used a specific color of tape, non-unique to packaging, like let's say blue on the inside, from like one of the top flaps down. And I was there, sorry, it wasn't for a send out, a back, it was a send out. They were just like, hey, check this out, this is what we're doing right now, we think we got this. And so they ran that line of like blue tape from the top flap like all the way down to wherever the Caracas was, just to signal like, hey, there's something else in this package, like this is a unique identifier here. And I think eventually it might have just turned into like cards in cases in like a mailer, in like a bubble mailer inside the mini box in time. It was just a weird thing. It was like one weird project. And one of the ephemeral projects in a warehouse like that is always going to be managing the state of your orders and seeing at what stage your constraint is. That was one of the biggest projects I worked on for BI in regards to the warehouse. Every manager wanted to know, do we need to hire more employees, and if so, where? So throughout the life cycle of these orders, everything would be tracked, and you could see how many open orders there were at every stage. And sure enough, everything sits at shipping, so it's like, all right, cool, whatever. You're just waiting for USPS to get there, and like you scan everything on the way out. But prior to that, is it the fill-up station? Is it one of the products that's just really slow in gathering their orders? Is it verification, etc.? And I built this real-time report of like, all right, it refreshes every however long. Here you go. Here's your warehouse data. And then always we made this gigantic buy that came with all this bulk. Whatever are we going to do with, several million Magic cards on pallets already? We have to sort this somehow. When are we going to do this, warehouse? And warehouse is just like, we got people, but we don't got time.
Yeah, don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that, for us, that was actually a pretty consistent conflict. I'm not sure if it was like that at Troll or not, where there was this, like, it wasn't really a rivalry or anything, but, the warehouse didn't necessarily always get along with the Magic people because everyone thought the other side didn't do anything, which I guess is really more true of, like, work in general. The other department's always going to be doing something, but that was something I always found interesting. And then we'd have breaks for set releases, and they would come over, and it would be the same few people because it was the ones in the warehouse that played Magic.
Would you compete?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And we destroyed them every time.
Yeah. But as far as I know, there was no animosity because, everybody...
Animosity's not the right word. More like a rivalry, kind of.
Well, it's like camaraderie through suffering, because the Troll warehouse is exactly that. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. There were like a handful of offices in that building, a cafeteria, and then literally everything else was based around that warehouse. So everybody worked in the same conditions for the most part. So there's so everybody was always close to one another. And you take your breaks throughout the day, and there are a bunch of arcade cabinets, and we used to jam Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and it was just like you get 20-some people just crowded around that cabinet, just going at it. And like the only time there was ever any kind of rivalry was just those busts. Like, that was it, because the entire warehouse would come together, and you'd just have teams rallying around their manager who would just quote unquote talk trash. And they would just speed bust. They would have I don't think there are videos of it on YouTube. I think they just went up on Facebook for some people, if you knew them, that were part of like individual speed challenges for box busting. Didn't matter what game it was. Like, people would just compete to box bust in those and the warehouse has a hell of a time doing that stuff. I never got invited to do any of the busts, but I've heard they were always a blast to do. The first few, and then after that it just becomes tiresome being there at 12:01 a.m. cracking that stuff. But okay, so moving forward in the product life cycle. So we've talked about an order as a whole. So a product makes it on the website. Before somebody buys it, it's got to be entered onto the website. It's got to be priced properly, and if it sits there or it sells, somebody has to take care of that and look at it and adjust numbers. Either say, okay, this hasn't sold, we can drop the price, or we're selling more than we thought, we need to raise the price, or buy a listing. We're not getting any of these, we need them, we need to up the buy list, or we have enough, we need to pull it, change price, etc. Yeah. So at Mini, is it a specialist for buy list in general, one of the Magic specialists that kind of does everything else?
It started out when I was there that it was just in the office, all that was handled. And then it was like, all right, well, there's too much for, management to keep track of. Let's try to put this off on a couple other people.
Yep.
So it was delegated to one or two individuals. And it was still kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to go through like this weekly rotation where on Monday I reprice core sets alpha through 10th. Oh. Tuesday I do 11th through whatever the current one is. Mm-hmm. Wednesday I go from Arabian Nights through Alliances, kind of like that. And every 2 weeks it would change. Now, we did gatekeep our inventory. So it could only so many copies could sell. And then all orders had to be approved.
And that's kind of common throughout the industry. You look at Star City, Card Kingdom, those guys gate at different numbers. I think Card Kingdom is 8, Star City is either 4 or 8. Maybe they've upped it since.
I think it's 8, and it's also by rarity. Like they'll let you get 20 commons.
Yep.
4 to 8 years.
Channel gates at 50, I think, no matter what it is, and Haruruya gates only on new set release cards for a certain amount of time. So, like, gatekeeping like that is super common in the industry. It helps a lot. Like, people think it's more of a hindrance on the buy, and it honestly is. But it can save your bacon when it comes to to run on cards because you can't pay attention to everything all the time, especially when you do staggered repricing like that.
And that was also true for buybacks as well, as it all had to be approved beforehand. And that's something that I think a lot of companies do that's kind of like a protection measure. Like, well, buyout's happening. Why is a buyout happening?
Yes.
Well, everyone's dumping all of their Mox Opals on us. Oh, it got banned.
Yep.
That's why. All right, well, we're going to reject all of these orders and lower our buy price. And that's something that, salaried management is for. That's why you have them, so that they can do things like that if you need them to do after hours.
Yeah.
And that was, kind of how that was handled. Was it all had to go through the approval process, and once it was approved, then it fell to us.
Okay.
Repricing, delegated, same with buy list. But on that note, some of us would be like, hey, I've noticed this card is kind of spiking, and we'd have like a group talk, and all right, well, we'll go ahead and up the price a little on it. Why not?
Yep.
Because obviously we're all paying attention. We all know this is a thing. Yeah, sure. Let's see what happens. And some people don't like some of the cards. It just doesn't matter. It's not selling. Whatever. Not the end of the world. We don't have to reprice it.
Got it.
There's a floor for rares. Obviously, every place has that. And then there's certain older cards that it's just like, look, same deal as TCG player. You look here, and these cards are not moving.
Yep.
But the price is the price is the price.
Yeah. So you're not going to just touch them. Because the moment you drop it X percentage below, somebody's going to come in and just pull them out.
Yeah. And that's something that I think a lot of companies get caught up on when they first start out, is chasing spikes, chasing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Instead of just trying to lock in margins. And, there's sunk cost fallacy is a thing. Obviously, I don't want to move it. I put money into it. But there is a point where, you have to move it because you don't have the capital to just sit on that card forever.
Correct.
And I think that's starting out something I've noticed a lot of people are bad about.
Yeah, you're running a website and you make your margins, and as necessary you drop your prices, but you're not running a website that is one giant Swiss auction where you just keep dropping the price until it sells. No, there's a floor for everything, and when it hits its floor, that's it. That's the rock bottom price it's going to stay at until it moves.
And was that at Troll? Did you just have the dedicated, I'm in charge of pricing, this is how I'm going to do it? What was that? What was that process like? Was it a weekly cycle? Or?
So it's very similar, and my entrance to the company actually meant change. So Troll had a large enough inventory where they had several, they called them Magic specialists, and again, same for every product vertical, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon specialists, board games, etc. And for Magic, each specialist, for the most part, was in charge of a subsection of Magic. So somebody had Standard, somebody had Modern, and then at that point in time, Legacy wasn't that big, so one person got swept up in everything from Modern to Alpha, going down, right? Supplementals at that point were pretty light, like one FTV, right? Yeah. And they dealt with repricing on the daily for buy and sell. My entrance to the company, one of the first projects I took on was to build a daily report for every category to show them their top sellers from the previous day under certain constraints. And then every specialist's day began the same, looking at that report, determining what needed to be repriced off of it, why, and if there actually needed to be an adjustment in one direction or another, and then moving through their respective subcategories within their product. I don't know the overall timetable that they wanted to see all of Magic evaluated for a reprice, if that was on the week. But I do know that sales report was incredibly important for the time being. Eventually, like most other vendors, buy list logic kind of caught up, and so it automated a bit, not entirely. There's still a human element to it for a while. I think there still is, but there's a lot more flags that you get now off of your buy list than you used to. there's a lot more data to be collected. The specialist role for Troll was a little different. So not only were you in charge of the repricing for both the buy and sell, but when acquisitions actually found a collection that was large enough, they went to the specialists to actually weigh in on that buy.
Okay.
So there was a ceiling on what acquisitions could do, and after that it went to the specialist, and the specialist, because they were over their portion of the category, could say, okay, this fills so many holes that any overage that we have on this stuff is fine because it's just going to slide in. I like the prices. I give you my stamp on this of approval on this portion.
Right? Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
That was kind of interesting. And as I mentioned before, acquisitions didn't do competitive research. The Magic specialists did. Our specialists checked TCG Player, eBay, and then like the rest of our competitors down the line for the prices that we liked to pick up for cards that we need. Because as we talked about a number of times, every vendor is their own island. They do their own thing, and thus we might have better margins on something than you might at Mini, so we'll just order it right out of your warehouse and slap it right in ours because we can move it.
And that's a pretty common theme, talking to people that work at other vendors. Is like periodically you'll just see a buy list show up that's from another vendor that's literally like, man, you guys are paying too good on this, so ship it.
Oh, yeah. Being the only, at the time and probably still, the largest Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon vendor, the amount of time people just bulldozed us with Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon because we were super aggressive with our prices compared to the open market. Like, I can't tell you how we would get those emails. The worst thing ever is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is bound to your region. So I think North America is region 2. You can't play cards from regions 1, 3, etc. Only region 2. So we would get emails all the time from other regions like, hey, you have so many of this card. I know you're not selling it. I want to buy it all. And the first thing the person that receives that email that knows about Yu-Gi-Oh! Has to respond back with is like, hey, look, we're region 2. You can't like play these in your region. You understand that, right? Like you have to make because it was one of those like, we'll bulldoze you. We don't care.
Yeah.
There's some weird bee. We had like thousands of this one little bee, and there was somebody flying into the country for Origins, and they were like, I'll buy all of the ones that you have and like everything else from this list. And we were like, cool, absolutely, but our cards are English, not your regions, and you know about the regionality rules, right?
Yeah.
And when they said, yeah, that's fine, we went, okay, there you go.
See ya.
Yeah. When Commander had just started coming up and like really becoming a force by the time I left Troll, and at that point we kind of pulled away from Standard to support older formats. And man, if Pete Hoffling would have been like, yo, I'll take all your Standard, I'm sure Troll and Toad would have just like driven that half of the warehouse to Star City from Kentucky.
Straight there and been like, here you go.
Deal.
Yeah.
In.
And that's something I think a lot of, having the dedicated, because we didn't really have a dedicated business to business. It was more or less like, all right, well, you have a good relation with these vendors. You have a good relation with these vendors.
Yep.
So if there's any liaising that needs to be done between these two, you'll handle the bulk of it. Fine details will go to whoever the fine details go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that, I've found to be a little bit more universal, regardless of your business model.
Yeah.
Is if that's, how you're doing it, great, do it.
Yeah.
See ya.
Exactly.
That's just how you're going to do it from then on.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And it, like I said, it goes underserved, and we like to talk about it all the time because it happens all the time at Magic Fest. It is.
Yeah.
It'll be Thursday, Friday, or Sunday, sometimes multiple days, because you'll set up those buys ahead of time, so you just do it on a Thursday or Friday right before everything opens. And then Sundays, that last all right, I bought all this stuff because it just came, and we can't use it. You guys want it? Here you go.
Great. See you later. Bye.
So that's an underserved aspect of this part of the industry, is that interaction. And the number of times a store goes out and they will email around like, hey, we're going out, this is what our collection is, or here are the photos, this is the highlights, do you want to send somebody out and evaluate? And you get that email as a vendor, and usually you say yeah, okay, we'll figure this out, we'll send somebody's paying for it, we'll evaluate, either there or bring the information home and come back with a number. Like
one way or another, we're getting it.
Yeah,
figure it out.
Yeah, it's incredible, and it is. This is one of those things like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where like everything that's happening with Pokemon is above board with all the graded stuff and all these large collections moving around. All these large collections in Magic, these private collections, stores, etc. It's all below board. You never know what happens because there are very large vendors in this space that get contacted first, and all that information is private. For Pokemon and for Yu-Gi-Oh, these markets are not as saturated with as many large vendors as Magic is, or as many large private collectors as Magic is. And I want to stress private on that.
Yeah.
Because what's going on is very public. Whereas what goes on with Magic is very private. And yes, there's a market cap difference where Magic has a market cap much less than Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! But it's also the fact that a lot of this happens, like I said, below decks that you just don't recognize or don't realize, you know. But before we head off of this, I know there's, there's my role that what I did, which is a little unique, and doesn't fit the product life cycle. Or is there anything else at Minis that we didn't touch on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like I said, it's all pretty general. It's pretty regular. Yep. Everyone's doing the same thing most of the time, and that's that's it.
Yeah. So the last thing to discuss is really just the business intelligence role. This is what I did for Troll, and it wasn't new then. It's not new now. Everybody's got somebody that does this. It could just be something as simple as a data analyst, where they're like, here's all the data, build us a report in Excel or Tableau or whatever software.
Yeah, whatever the case may be.
Yep. When I came into Troll and Toad and I was picked up, I already had a slate of reports to generate for the company. There was some of them were individual to categories, some of them were company wide, and it was really just kind of this beginning of like, all right, we really want to dig into the analytics and say like, okay, what are our shows doing on average? What are our shows like? Because they wanted to start looking at like, okay, is every region as profitable as another? Are some regions more profitable than others? What about anime shows? Are they doing better than Magic? Are Nationals better than Magic Fest? Obviously we go to Origins and Gen Con, but should we be looking more at conventions than something else? You need a BI dev for that. You need to look through that data set. It's not just about what's coming in through the pipeline and reporting on that. And so my role, I think at that point in time, the industry was a little more unique than what a lot of other people were doing, but I don't have that inside track because more often than not, people that do what I do don't go from vending to external. They'll like this and then stay with a hobby. More often than not, this industry loses people to other tech firms like Amazon or somebody else in that space, Google, that's a larger entity, and the hobby just kind of falls away as they're consumed by the rest of it. Obviously, it's not always the case because there are people that stay in certain areas, make more money in Amazon and stick it with the hobby because they can just buy more than they ever did before and they'll stay with it. But they don't start podcasts, put it that way.
Typically, no.
So I got to do that, and like I said, it's a unique insight because there really wasn't anybody else in the org that did this. And if somebody else from Troll were doing this podcast, I doubt that they would have made outreach to the BI dev and just be like, yo, explain what the company was trying to do at this point in time. And I can just tell you, we were playing with data and slicing it up. And like you can talk about, that point in time when you were at the company, everything fell to poop. And like, but yeah, Troll and Toad went through some times. The verification role that we talked about became very difficult. There was a lot of churn of skilled people, as there are at any company, and so you buy in product, you grade it, it gets misgraded, it goes in, you have holes in your inventory, and the company just kind of falls out of prominence. And that was trackable just by looking at the website. You can see like, okay, they're out of almost everything in standard. It comes in for the set release and then it's gone. Well, why? And you're like, well, read Reddit. Yep.
Yeah. That was around the time that the Troll and Toad near mint joke was running around, which got old.
Internally, yes. Externally, no, I enjoyed it. Because the joke didn't start as Troll and Toad. There's a lovely player up here from the greater New England area that I used to play with, and it used to be his name near mint. Why? Because when he was looking for duels and stuff for EDH, he's always like, I need...
Ranched.
Yeah. Just sleeve playable, but barely. And that was always the definition, because he would play in the events, and he was a semi-pro. He'd hit the Pro Tour a couple of times. He'd just send you on a mission. He's like, "This is what I'm looking for, since you got nothing better to do." And it's like, "All right, what condition do you want?" And he's like, "Me near mint," and you know what that meant.
Yep.
And so he had nothing to do with what happened to a Troll in that regard, but it just took on it. It took that spin.
Kind of became a Troll and Toad thing rather than a him thing. That's pretty good.
Yeah, more Troll than Toad at that point.
Yeah.
And
all right.
Yeah, the industry is ever evolving, and things have changed since we've both been there, I'm sure, because tech evolves by the day. And you never know what's going on at the top levels. Like, I was never privy to what was going on in the reports that they wanted generated at the top level, what was coming down in the pipe. So it's always an interesting game. Picks.
It's always above your pay grade. Yes, picks.
Yes, it's also true. All right, you can go first.
All right. So periodically, we'll go back and we'll look at a pick that we've had prior, and I am notorious for picking these cards. This is another instance where I have picked one of those cards. I am picking Zendikar Oracle of Moldiah. So this was picked way back in year one. And it was something that we've touched on periodically. Hey guys, this card needs a reprint. It's gonna get a reprint. When the reprint happens, the price is gonna go down. Well, it got a reprint. And price didn't quite go down as much as we thought it would, or I think a lot of other people did. Through no fault of their own, Wizards of the Coast underproduced Jumpstart. Yes, there were restraints on production. So the Jumpstart reprint that was supposed to take this to a sub $20 card, hopefully, did no such thing. It's still hovering around $26 to $30, depending on the day of the week. So why am I picking this? Well, before too long, we are going to get out of the window for what Wizards of the Coast considers an at-will print. That's a problem for the Jumpstart reprint, because when that happens, that reprint's dead, and it's had effectively no impact on the price. When that happens, when that announcement is made, it seems pretty reasonable that you can expect stuff like that to just start going up, 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 up. Because at that point, the reprints have dried up. We know what the population is. It's not largely changed, so it's going to go back to where it was.
That is
and
correct.
There was a time where $35 TCG low meant $45 to $50 in a booth. That time is not too far off. So while we are in a little bit of a downslope, particularly for the Zendikar printing, because the Jumpstart has remained relatively static at around $30. While we're on that downslope of sub $30, pick it up. Pick up as many as you can for between, I'd say, $20 to $25. Maybe not as many. Probably stop between 10 and 20. But I think that in the midterm, this card easily gets back up to 35, 40 again on TCG Player. I think in the long term, this card is easily $50 to $60 at a booth once those events come
Start
back.
up. Yeah. Agreed. I think it hits 50 sooner. It's just going to dry up over time as people move in and pull it out of pop. This is 3 and a green. It's eminently splashable into any deck that wants to play multiple lands in a turn or just get out ahead really early. I think it's super important to reevaluate cards like this, as often, not as often as you can, but probably once a quarter when you're looking at something like this, especially if the timeline that they showed for set printings in 2021 is to be correct, because if I remember this correctly, we get Time Spiral 2 between Call Time and Strixhaven, which means we get a supplemental in maybe March, somewhere around there, if the time, if they still hold set printing dates to where I expect them to be. And then we know what the next supplemental after that is going to be. It's going to be Modern Horizons 2. So it's not just the window for a regular reprint on this is closed. We're getting to the end of the at-will, and unless WotC just decides to spew off and make a bunch more jump starts just in case, they're going to be locked into Time Spiral 2. And if that's a flop, then we might see more jumpstart. But there's no way Modern Horizons is going to be so bad, quote-unquote, that we get Jumpstart reprints instead because people are clamoring for that over either of the other two supplementals. And this wasn't a difficult conversation to have in regards to, do we want to bubble this back up? It was pretty easy looking at that timeline and discussing, like, yeah, this needs to
pretty
be renewed.
clearly.
Yeah.
Something we should talk about, and that's where it's at.
Yep, absolutely. My card, on the other hand, is a card from Magic Origins that gets a decent benefit from Commander Legends, and that is Tainted Remedy. We are a little bit behind right now on the initial spike that happened around Ikoria, as you can see. And this card, when you first read it, you're like, okay, maybe this combo's in something weird. Like, it's obviously seeing play somewhere. It's seeing play in EDH, is kind of holding strong. Overall, this didn't get a lot of support recently. It just has renewed interest in older strategies. So, in taking a look at EDH Rec, some of the newest cards that are available to you are these cards that want to play a longer game, and that strategy already features prominently in the commanders that were being played with us previously. But then things like Yorlock, which is effectively Mana Barbs the commander, is meant to play a longer game and bleed you out slowly. Liesa, very similarly, Liesa is going to bleed you out slowly, just like Cabal, probably faster than Yorlock. And then you have Gen, which is probably the most unique new card that focuses around here because it's enchantment swappies. It's basically the Goblin Welder for enchantments.
Yeah.
And we already have a number of enchantment-themed commanders for this card in Zur. And, then Gen.
Estrid, there's a bunch for enchantments now.
Oh, yes. But it's the fact that it just fits into the rest of these things. I wouldn't expect Gen to really push this card that much because this doesn't punish as well as some of the other black enchantments do that you want to play in a Gen deck. Gen wants to do a bunch of enchanting players, so you're looking at curses in black or red. Even Overwhelming Splendor, the humility from Amonkhet that costs 6?
Yeah.
Whatever that is. Let me check real quick.
That was Overwhelming Splendor, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, Overwhelming Splendor. Or it costs 8. I'm sorry. It's ridiculous. It works really well again if you can dump it in the graveyard and then toot it back in. That's the kind of card you want to be playing here. Tainted Remedy doesn't, you're not forcing your opponent to gain life with Gen or any of the enchantments that you pair, with Gen. This is just kind of a renewed interest card, something that plays this long, grindier game and fits in decks that makes you want to play the most Magic possible. I don't think we're going to see it in the final, maximum hate-filled Gen builds, although if you do combo it with Beacon of Immortality, you do shotgun an opponent out of the game. Hands down, 2-card combo. Boom. You're dead. This isn't Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood, or whatever. Sanguine Blood Exquisite Bond? Whatever. I was right the first time. Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood. It's not that level of good, so you're not going to see it all over the place. You're just going to see it in this kind of renewed interest area. And from here, this is where I think the timeline is really 6 months, at least. Yeah. Because you got to wait on people to move in. The card moved over the weekend. After I picked it, we saw a drop in TCG player population by a lot, a decent amount. We're 15-ish% drop in population. But the market price also dropped, which meant people are just trying to get their copies onto TCG Player and out. And until that stops, we're not going to see a continued rise in this card via the new interest and new eyes on this stuff. And my expectation, like I said, is 6 months for that. Unless for whatever reason, these Yorlock decks, Liesa and Gen, kind of cement themselves on this card for whatever reason, because they decide to use things like King Kenrith, target player gains 5 life. You can just pop somebody for 5. But if you're running Sanguine Blood Exquisite Bond, you just gain 5 and win the game. It's this card is in an interesting space. We're losing population on it overall. It's floating around the EDH communities. It will find a home in time. It goes in grindy decks, and there are people that just like to play long, grindy games of Magic, and that's kind of where we are. We're just seeing a population drop overall and trying to attempt to attribute demand to this. And like I said, it's not like this card got anything radically new. It's always had this kind of demand to it from these older support cards, these older support generals. None really combo with it that well, or none of them scream, hey, Tainted Remedy is good in your deck because of me. It just plays to this strategy and is bleeding out of the marketplace at a decent rate. The delta between Biolist and market is something that is a little scary overall, although Biolist did go up by about 50 cents. It's like 3x between Biolist, like 1.5 on Card Kingdom, and the market dropped to like 324 over the weekend on TCG, which, like I said, is a lot more palatable than it was. Market has since gone up to 346, so that's good if you have them. If you're buying in now, you can get in for a little over $3. Those are the lowest price copies that we're seeing. And there's some near mint mixed in with these light played copies. So like I said, people are looking to dump theirs. People want out of this card while there's this demand. I think now is the time to buy in if you can. You want to buy as low as you can and maybe buy it up to like market price. Maybe $4 would be your ceiling. And then I hold. And I hold, like I said, for at least 6 months. Because these extra copies flooding into the market are being pulled. It's kind of fudging the numbers as people try and just fire share is the wrong word. They're not emergency selling. They're making hay while the sun shines. Selling into the spike. Sure. And we need to wait for that to end. We need for demand to continue, which I believe it will. I don't think this flood into the market sates demand. I think it's going to stay there. And we need interest in these new generals and these new cards to stay high for the next 6 months, which I think it will, heading into Time Spiral. And that's when we'll see this card really take off more towards $5, $6, $7, and you should be able to exit to Biolist around that point in time. Foils, probably not a bad game. You can pick them up on TCG for like $4.50 for light play. Like that's not bad. That's not bad at all when Card Kingdom is buying foils for $4 and $5.20 in credit. Like that's the market immediately. You can see that the delta is really small in the open market. And if you want to buy into foils now and hold, by all means go for it. But for every foil you get, that's like half of a non-foil that you're not buying.
Yeah. So
definitely something to weigh there. And like I said, I don't think this card loses in the short term. I think it wins in 6 months. This is something I am excited to actually, pick up and hold after running my Pioneer specs last night. And this is something that I would recommend in some amount over the next couple of months because the opportunity is there.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a solid one. I think it, again, scratches all the boxes that everyone in MTG Finance has been emphasizing lately. Casual EDH, casual EDH, casual EDH, casual EDH. Mm-hmm. It's the type of thing that even if you miss your window on getting out on, unlike my pick, the window's going to come back.
Yeah.
The window may come back on mine. It may not. But it definitely always comes back on casual EDH, like we touched on last week with the cyclical nature of how this stuff is.
Yeah. No, I love the generals that are associated with this card because they speak to casual EDH aside from Selenia, which is like the number one, which I assume is just built around Phyrexian Processor, dunking your life total to like 2 and then just taking over the board from there, essentially. The rest of it, like I said, is just, I want to play the most Magic I can, and if this is a 4-hour game, I'm having the most fun possible. And this gets you there, because you can just fort up behind it. And I promise you, if you look at this card on EDH Rec and you look at the other enchantments that go with it, it's like Safety Sphere and like all this other stuff to just turtle up.
Hello 40.
Yeah. But in the reverse direction, you're not helping anybody. You're just slowly killing them. It's the opposite of Feldegriff.
Theme deck.
Yeah, it's the opposite of Feldegriff. Just wait for me to death grasp you. But It's just so interesting. It's interesting that it popped, and I'm interested to track this over time. It's done nothing but gain, and I don't get it, but I have to like it. I'm not that kind of player, but exactly. I'm not that kind of player, but game respects game, and here we are.
Yeah.
I have Sunbird Invocation. Somebody has Tainted Remedy. We're two different people. You know.
And some of us are stuck with a growing number of Sarkans on the ceilings. One day.
Hey, you know what? I'll make my Cloak of Sunbird Invocation. You can make your Cloak of Sarkhan's Unsealing, and I'll see you at the next event.
That works.
But I think on that note, we are done covering what it is like to be a vendor on the day-to-day. And like I said, I will be having another Patreon-only podcast go up this week where I will be talking to a previous guest we had on the cast who worked with me at Troll and Toad that's going to go into these roles a little bit more. It can give us some more information about what it is like to work for Troll and Toad, you know, a massive vendor in the space, and what it's like to work as an individual vendor in the space now, like, and the changes in the day-to-day and lifestyle. But for us this week, I am at Halt, I am Reptar on Twitter. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
We are at MtG Cabalcast on Facebook, Patreon, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher. I verified Audible.
Great.
And we'll see you next week.
See you guys.